A perfect storm of war and extreme weather threatens to unleash a food crisis worldwide. But are we really heading towards a summer of shortages? A stock take on two staples and a luxury. Ajay Goyal processes raw wheat and sells it to businesses using it to make products we consume, like bakeries, hotels, restaurants. After months of dealing with a shaky market, his business has finally found steady ground. In February, prospects had looked promising for wheat processors like Ajay thanks to record output in India. Then, Russia invaded Ukraine, a major wheat exporter. India, which has traditionally consumed most of its wheat domestically, started exporting to cash in on global demand. After all, India had more than enough after a bumper harvest for a fifth straight year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi even declared that if world trade rules permitted, India could feed the world. Until an unseasonal heat wave damaged crops. Domestic wheat prices rose by nearly 20% between March and April, putting a big squeeze on Ajay's margins.
So normally, wheat is a very low volatile commodity. There is hardly any volatility in wheat prices. And even 5% volatility is a big thing in wheat prices in the past.
Along with the highest inflation rates seen in 2 decades, it forced India to make a U-turn and completely ban wheat exports. The international community criticized it and urged Delhi to reverse course to manage the global wheat shortage. But what's bad for the world is not necessarily so for India. Domestic businesses have welcomed the ban.
Domestic industry has been really protected with this ban. Because of this only now our industry is getting consistent wheat supply presently also, and now we are also sure that the same kind of situation will continue for the season until the next crop comes.
Better wheat supply is critical to food security in India as well as many other countries worldwide. Wheat flour is a staple of the Indian diet and it's provided to the country's poorest using the public distribution system. But a ban on exports is raising concerns that it may trigger food shortages in other parts of the world, especially in countries in Africa and the Middle East, which were relying on New Delhi to feed their population. As global temperatures rise, it could become more common for food-producing countries to cut back on supplies.
If climate change is going to intensify and as a result if production is going to come under stress, unfortunately I see that the protectionist food policies are going to expand and expand, which does tell us that it is very, very important for the global community to actually come together to act on climate change.
The Indian government already projects that wheat production could decline by 6,000 kilos for every 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature. And without urgent action, we could face food shortages in India and internationally by 2050, with no easy answers to the dilemma of whom to feed in a globalized food market.
A typical view across farm fields in France, Europe's biggest grain producer. Wheat, barley and sugar beet are all growing here. Cedric Benoit is the third generation of his family to farm this land, but he's finding this year harder and hotter than normal. Last month was the warmest ever May on record in France, but that followed exceptionally cold temperatures at times last year.
On a de plus en plus des phénomènes anormaux qu'on avait très peu auparavant. L'an dernier, par exemple, mes betteraves sucrières ont gelé, alors que moi, c'était jamais arrivé sur l'exploitation. C'est le genre de choses qu'on a.
This is France's worst water deficit for a generation. Levels in rivers and reservoirs are at a low, and experts are warning the changing water cycle is not a one-off occurrence. It's linked to sustained climate change.
Plus d'un tiers de la France est touchée par les sécheresses, ce qui est vraiment très très important. Les sécheresses, on les connaît depuis quelques années, chaque année. Avant, on avait une sécheresse de temps en temps, maintenant, ça devient récurrent. On s'est aperçu ces 2 dernières années que les sécheresses, elles n'étaient pas simplement pendant l'été, mais maintenant, on a des sécheresses hivernales. Et ces sécheresses hivernales, c'est un vrai problème parce que quand elles arrivent dans des régions qui sont déjà en stress hydrique l'été, vous comprenez bien que ça accentue le problème.
If the heatwave conditions persist, the affected regions could be looking at a ban on some agricultural irrigation. Cedric has access to a well on his land, and so he hopes he won't lose another season of crops, but this may not be the case for others.
The rising cost of living is hitting families up and down France, but it's the rising cost of cereals which is affecting France's arable farmers, seeing an impact here of something taking place 2,000 kilometres away.
The effects of the war in Ukraine were debated at this year's cereal farming conference. Christiane Lambert, who leads France's National Federation of Farmers' Unions, attended the event. She says there's been a surge in charges linked to agricultural products such as sunflower oil.
Pour l'alimentation animale des animaux, également des augmentations fortes de charges et une vraie difficulté à répercuter ces hausses de charges dans la vente de nos produits. Cela s'ajoute à la flambée énergétique que nous avions connue à l'automne avec le redémarrage de l'économie. Donc le tout ajouté crée une complexité particulière pour les agriculteurs aujourd'hui.
The cost of living crisis was the main issue for voters in the general election this month, and the potential decrease in harvests would result in lower incomes for farmers and therefore push up prices even more for consumers.
Au niveau français, on réfléchit justement à un système assurantiel qui sera un peu calqué sur le modèle espagnol aussi. On était voir ce qui se faisait en Espagne et qui soit là vraiment pour amener une bouée de sauvetage en fait à l'exploitation. Ça rembourserait pas 100% des dégâts, mais ça rembourserait 80% des dégâts pour permettre justement à l'exploitation de garder la tête hors de l'eau en termes économiques.
The Spanish agricultural insurance scheme was set up in 1978, and it's designed to guarantee farmers coverage for uncontrollable natural phenomena. This could be a precious lifeline for French farmers as France's grain-growing regions face more heat waves this summer, unleashing a perfect storm, with the drought causing a drop in crop output at the very time when there's an expectation to produce more because of the war.
At this mill, sugarcane is processed into sugar. Its owner, Sri Renuka Sugars, says it handles up to a fifth of India's exports of the commodity. Destinations include East Africa, the Middle East, Malaysia and Indonesia. But the government this month capped the amount of sugar that can be sent outside of the country, limiting exports to a total of 10 million tonnes in the current season to the end of September. It soured the industry's mood.
Whether we like it or not, the world is becoming much more inward looking, and every country is protecting its own domestic market. India is no different.
Inflation has soared to above 7%, with food prices rising globally partly due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine playing a major role. India's eager to safeguard food supplies amid a trend of protectionism in the region and keep a lid on prices of staples like sugar. Higher food costs hit the poor the hardest and can affect the government's popularity. Retail sugar prices in Mumbai are up about 10% compared with a year ago. That has the owner of this sweet stall worried, as he's struggling to cope with rising prices of other ingredients, including cooking oil. So he's glad the government is intervening.
ज़्यादा एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे तो भी रेट बढ़ेगा तो और हमारे लिए कठिनाई होएगी और धंधा करना हमारा है ना बहुत कठिनाई हो जाएगी क्योंकि रेट बढ़ेगा तो भी हम लोग है ना पूरा हमारा जो स्वीट का दुकान है वो मेजरमेंट नहीं कर पाएंगे और उसको सैलरी देना स्टाफ को आदमी को बहुत कठिनाई हो जाएगी.
The government is also restricting sugar exports for the first time in 6 years to ensure locals have enough, as the sweet-toothed Indian population is expected to consume some 27 million tonnes of sugar this season. There have been bumper sugarcane crops, and India is expected to produce an all-time high of 36 million tonnes of sugar. There's also some 8 million tonnes of stocks from the previous season. That leaves it with plenty of surplus for export. But analysts say the government is erring on the side of caution.
Sugar economics are quite dependent on other geographies as well. Brazil, which is the largest producer of sugarcane and thereby sugar, has diverted significantly towards the ethanol segment. And that is because of the crude oil prices showing a sharp increase.
High energy prices make it more lucrative for Brazil's sugarcane mills to make the switch from producing sugar to sugarcane-derived ethanol, which itself is already attractive for the fact that ethanol buyers pay for their purchases more quickly than sugar ones. While Brazil's decision is creating a dent in global sugar supply, the eventual supply from India will still ensure the shortfall won't be too crippling. If India reaches the 10 million tonnes that exports have been limited to, that will still be a record high, up from just over 7 million tonnes in the previous year. Beyond the quantity restriction, sugar exporters are now having to deal with more paperwork under the new curbs, which requires permissions for shipments.
Indian exports, in any case, would be curbed willy-nilly in the next few months, largely on account of the release order mechanisms, and obviously all this is going to affect Indian exports for sure.
Despite the cap, the company is expecting to see its biggest exports ever this year. Some analysts also believe India is unlikely to hit levels above the 10 million cap anyway. So in the end, the restrictions won't leave too nasty an aftertaste this season, and unlike in the case of other commodities, the outlook for this season's sugar supplies still looks set to have a reasonably sweet ending, given the current global situation.
It's that time of the year again when the king of fruits is in season. With COVID restrictions eased and international borders opened, everything seemed to be falling into place for durian sellers this year, who were excited to welcome customers back to their stores. But their optimism and excitement was short-lived when they realized the durian trees in Malaysia just aren't producing as much as they were hoping for. Han Sing Keng has been running the small 8-hectare durian plantation in Kulai, Johor for more than a decade, managing more than 200 trees here on an area the size of 15 football fields.
Okay, you look at this tree. This tree is about 31 years. Then one time, like this time, I think we keep about 250 to 300 pieces, one tree. I think maximum is 350 we will keep.
But Sing Keng tells me things are different now. His harvest dropped by more than 50% compared to previous years. One main factor is the erratic weather. Extreme rainfall and fluctuating temperatures over the last few months have caused inconsistent and lower production of the durian fruit.
When the durian blossom season hit by the rain, so reduce the quantity of the harvest. That means you less production, less product, then you don't have so many durian for sales. We need the quantity. We need the quantity to get more. Yeah. So the income will be affected.
Durian farmers also had to grapple with rising labor costs, as well as a steep increase in price of pesticides and fertilizers, which were affected by the Russia-Ukraine war. All this translates to higher prices of durians for customers. Durian trees generally need an environment with a temperature of about 24 to 32 degrees Celsius and moist with about 75 to 80% humidity. Such rigid conditions make precision farming a lot more difficult, especially if you're only relying on manpower. To practice irrigation on a daily basis accurately is always a great challenge, and farm managers will need to check the soil moisture level, the rainfall volume and weather forecasts constantly, yet manually. All this to ensure a good quality yield. So what can be done to make durian production less labor intensive and more resistant to weather changes? I take a trip a little further north to Batu Pahat, to a nearly 300-hectare plantation owned by Top Fruits, one of Malaysia's largest durian exporters. The entire farm's production process has transformed dramatically over the last decade. Most labor-intensive tasks are now replaced by innovative solutions, as the company turns to cutting-edge methods to boost its output. We're looking at technology to make it a little bit more resistant to weather changes and to natural conditions. So perhaps you could share a little bit more about the types of technology that you use on the farm.
For us, we have we do control the technology by mainly looking at the environment factors. For environmental factors, we have the first, which is the weather station. This is a weather station that we have. So it controls the rainfall, the temperature, the humidity, and also the wind's direction as well. So that's one part of it. Of course, then we do have the second part, which is the soil health. Soil health, we look at the sensors of the soil, understanding the moisture, the nutrient level that is needed.
By adopting precision agriculture technologies, farmers are able to improve crop quality. Dr. Tan says it's a much faster way to get more consistent results. Thousands of sensors like these, which track soil quality, are fitted across the farm. Data is then uploaded onto a cloud system, and farmers can then simply download the information onto their handheld devices. These sprinklers are also remotely activated, and the farm also uses drones to spray pesticides over its vast plantation.
I'm a modern farmer. I want to maintain to be a modern farmer. I would like to understand what are things going on in my farm. That's why we came up with the smart farming concept. So smart farming concept is basically advanced technology, utilizing advanced technology to help you to actually track, monitor, automate, and also analyze whatever activities are happening in the farm.
In total, Top Fruits has spent more than 4 million ringgit, or about $1 million over the last 3 years to modernize its farm. And they're planning to pump in millions more over the next few years. The hefty investments, they say, have paid off. It has led to an increase in yields of 40%, while the farm's workforce has shrunk by 30%. The company is now able to produce 800 tons of durians from its farms every year. More than 80% of its crop frozen in factories are exported overseas, much of it to China. But using these smart farming methods are not common in most durian farms in Malaysia, where farmers still typically rely on a large labor force, instinct, and sometimes trial and error. Dr. Tan is on a mission to get more of his industry players on board by providing consulting services to smaller farms who are now ready to modernize. He believes this will benefit the entire durian industry in Malaysia.
If we don't work together today, what will happen is the durian price will continue to go up. At one day, it might not be affordable for export as well. So it doesn't give value, and it will actually dampen exports. So we actually tell everyone the know-how, we actually consult people and also move forward. How do we want to reduce our labor? How are we going to look at our security issues? The whole thing, the A to Z about farming. In that way, we can actually have more fruits in the market and also be able to stabilize it. Rather than every year, the only thing that we hear is price going up, going up, going up, especially for the export grade. And that might not be good for our long-term business.
To further future-proof itself, Top Fruits is collaborating with local universities to do further research on optimizing durian growth. Malaysia's government has also pledged to develop and tap into the potential of the durian industry. This includes providing subsidies for farming land, grants for producers to adopt new technology, and courses to educate farmers on new production techniques, so technology can benefit durian farms big and small.